Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool. We've got a lot to talk about today. We have a crazy martini because one of the weirdest people in politics is for some reason back on the stage, literally and figuratively, for the Democrats. Our second good martini, I guess we don't have a bad martini. Good martini is Democratic infighting. May it last as long as humanly possible so they can do less damage on actual policy. And we start with this good martini, and that's that the astronauts are home. They were supposed to have an 8-day mission to the space station. They were gone for about 9 or 10 months. And it took Elon Musk and SpaceX to go get them. And thankfully, the mission was successful. The SpaceX mission went off last week. They docked at the space station, came home, splashed down in the Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico, depending on your parlance, just off the coast of Tallahassee. Everybody seems to be fine. They're going to go through a whole battery of medical tests, especially after being up there that long. Thank you to SpaceX for getting this done. We mothballed the space shuttle program. We've been relying on the Russians to get us into space, and that's a whole other issue considering all the other issues we've got going on with the Russians right now. But the fact that our government literally can't get up there on its own is pretty embarrassing. But maybe it's time for the private sector to really take over this whole operation. But what you saw from most media outlets was minimal coverage, because the last thing we want is for Elon Musk and SpaceX to get any positive coverage right now. He's a villain because of Doge and because he supported Trump. And so therefore, any positive coverage of that, or at least mentioning them, needs to be minimized. Fox News pretty much covered it wall to wall during Brett Baer's show yesterday. And he had a whole panel of former astronauts on, including Scott Kelly, the twin brother of Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, who began his comments by being very upset about something Greg Gutfeld said earlier in the evening on The Five when he said that Joe Biden left the astronauts stranded up there. So here is what Scott Kelly said.
Before I talk about that, let me say something. I was watching the your previous program, The Five, and they're talking about abandoned and they were stranded by President Biden. That is not true. They have had a spacecraft up there since September that was going to bring them home. They've always had a ride home, and the decision to keep them up there had nothing to do with politics. It was just the fact that you need crew members to operate the space station, and they were the two that were there, and you had to send up a vehicle with 2 empty seats. So the safest thing to do was to just leave them there. But they weren't stranded. They always had a ride home. Now,
then why didn't you go get them? And it took so many months, 9 or 10 months to go get them here. So I think he's spinning this badly, because if they're only supposed to be up there for 8 days, then other people should have been on the space station. Other people should have been able to come up and relieve them. And so there was a reporter from the Washington Post, Jim, who interviewed the astronauts while they were still up there, asking if Elon Musk had made this offer and that Biden had rejected it. They said that it was factual, but they didn't know the details. Elon Musk last night on the Hannity show confirmed that it was the case, and he said it was a political decision not to do it in the heart of the campaign season. So the best news, of course, is that they're home. They're home safely. The mission was a success to go get them. Elon and SpaceX deserve credit for this. And now the damage control over what Biden may or probably did here is going to be going into high gear.
Greg, first of all, when you go up for what is supposed to be an 8-day mission and end up staying more than 8 months, you are just asking for Gilligan's Island jokes. This is the 3-hour tour that turns into many seasons and all that stuff. And this idea of you're not stranded, you have a vehicle. Have you ever gotten a ride somewhere and the person who drove you there drives off and says, don't worry, there's a car there that's stick. You can drive yourself home, except neither you nor anybody else you're with can drive a stick shift, and thus you can't. Would you say you're stranded then? Does that, qualify? If you have a vehicle but nobody can drive the vehicle, guess what? You're stranded. And I hadn't planned on getting into this with his brother. I try not to pick on twins too much, whether it's Julian and Joaquin Castro or Tomax and Zaymot from G.I. Joe. It just seems like I'm always running into these evil twins. This idea that his brother had said, because he was so angry about Elon Musk, he was selling his Tesla. He's buying a gasoline-powered car. Now, I thought the whole point of buying the Tesla was you want to protect the environment. It's all about, no, look at me, I'm green. I'm protecting the planet. I'm a good guy. But the moment Elon does stuff, I got to get rid of it, got to sell it, got to get rid of it. It's the same car. It didn't increase emissions. It's not any better or worse. It's just that you're so mad about what Elon Musk is doing. You can't be seen driving around with a Tesla. Also, the possibility that some crazy lefty protester is going to set you on fire. Like that's the other new safety risk. It's not from the car itself. It's from crazy unhinged leftists who hate your car. Even Boeing managed to send out a congratulatory tweet. Now, if Boeing can rise to the occasion and say, hey, nice job, SpaceX, I think it's not too much to ask that prominent Democrats do the same. And that is the mentality we see here, where because Musk is doing things you don't like the same way you see, the New Republic and other magazines saying Elon Musk is an idiot. And the film The Glass Onion had this very Elon-esque character. And the twist is that this guy who everybody thought was a genius is an idiot all along. When you can throw rockets into the air and catch them like a boomerang, I think you can figure some stuff out there, right? Electric cars had existed for a long time. Elon Musk made them cool, turned them into sports cars that everybody wanted to do. And when everybody saw the Cybertruck, my reaction and reaction of a lot of other people is, oh, good, finally, someone drew the truck that I drew in kindergarten with the weird angles and all that stuff. And yet, in my neighborhood, I'm seeing Cybertrucks everywhere. He has made an electric truck cool for a certain demographic. Elon has figured some stuff out. There's other stuff he says that's crazy and stupid. People are not all knowing in some category, and they're not all incompetent in some category. So when Elon and SpaceX do something nice, it's not going to kill you to say, hey, nice job. Thanks for helping us out. But apparently it's too much to ask from the Kelly brothers or a whole bunch of other, folks. They can't do what somehow Boeing, which had the assignment and fumbled, bit of a rough year over at Boeing. Look, they managed to do it, but apparently it's too much to ask from certain Democratic figures and commentators and such.
Yes, prior to Musk's endorsement of Trump, owning a Tesla was virtue signaling, and now destroying Teslas are virtue signaling. And by the way, if you really do care about the environment, lighting cars with electric batteries on fire is not good for the environment. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm pretty sure that's bad for the environment with all the chemicals that are going on in there.
Look, the only reason crazy environmentalists aren't burning you at the stake is because they don't want the carbon emissions.
But apparently they'll get there eventually if they hate you enough. So just unbelievable. But I'll tell you what is believable: the convenience of booking your next medical appointment on ZocDoc. No longer are you too busy or just let that thing heal on its own. It could not be simpler to find and book an appointment on ZocDoc.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier in the week, my optometrist moved away, needed to find a new one, and was looking for one that was close by. Well, ZocDoc found me one that was practically so good I could see it there even without updating my prescription. So I go, and I understand, like, if you've had any medical condition or a thing where you're kind of overdue for a checkup, look, go do it. Not knowing is actually its own kind of form of torture. You go to the doctor, you get it checked out, you get the reassurance. As it happened, my new optometrist said that my eyes had actually gotten better since my last eye exam. So now I love going to the optometrist. Now I think it's fantastic and all that stuff. So don't sit there with that uncertainty. Don't sit there with that, nagging sense. You will feel better knowing, as they said in G.I. Joe, for my second reference to that in this podcast, knowing is half the battle. Make that doctor's appointment and use ZocDoc because they're great for finding doctors. Great location, very convenient, and will take your insurance.
ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/3ML to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/3ML. ZocDoc.com/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our second good martini now. And if there's anything we love, it's infighting among Democrats, because if they're focused on each other, the damage they can do to the rest of us is usually fairly limited. So the fallout is still coming as it relates to Chuck Schumer and the other Senate Democrats who voted to invoke cloture and get to that final vote. Schumer did not vote for the final bill to keep the government funded, but obviously, without his vote to invoke cloture, we never would have gotten there. So he is now a pariah among many on the left, especially the progressives in the House of Representatives. One of those is Maryland Congressman Glenn Ivey, who I believe is the first House member to not just denounce Schumer's actions, but to actually suggest it's time for a different leader for Senate Democrats.
I was deeply disappointed that Senator Schumer voted with the Republicans. You know you're on bad ground when you get a personal tweet from Donald Trump thanking you for your vote, right? And so I respect Chuck Schumer. I think he's had a great long-standing career. He's done a lot of great things. But I'm afraid that it may be time for the Senate Democrats to pick new leadership as we move forward.
And Axios is picking up on this, reporting that some House members are urging AOC to mount a primary bid against Schumer in 2028. We heard rumors of that in 2022. Didn't happen. A senior House Democrat and their colleagues' mood towards Schumer was quoted as this: his popularity is hovering somewhere between Elon Musk and Ebola virus. A third House Democrat who represents a swing district, when asked about Schumer, responded sarcastically, "Who?" Well, for his part yesterday, Chuck Schumer was trying to get back in the good graces of the far left by going on The View, and he got some pointed questions about his decision to invoke cloture on that bill. But Chuck Schumer's also trying to win back the progressive base, and he's apparently channeling Barack Obama from 2012 and taking pot shots at business owners and other people who have been successful. So here's Chuck Schumer's argument about who he calls the rich and greedy.
And you know what their attitude is? I made my money all by myself. How dare your government take my money from me? I don't want to pay taxes. Or I built my company with my bare hands. How dare your government tell me how I should treat my customers, my the land and water that I own, or my employees? They hate government. Government's a barrier to people, a barrier to stop them from doing things. They want to destroy it. We are not letting them do it, and we're united.
Okay, good.
That was the bumper music there for The View. We did not just splice in some old Wham or something.
Say,
from the
they're playing him
1980s.
off like the Oscars, right? This speech is kind of going on, da-da-da-da-da, trying to nudge him off the stage. Chuck, you don't want to say this.
We don't want the government breathing down our neck, giving us all sorts of high taxes and regulations. So he's tone deaf again. So what do you make of the? It's not a civil war yet, but the uncomfortable infighting on the left.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Greg, what do you think the lowest net worth around the View table is? Think there's anybody with like less than $1 million, maybe two? Yeah.
Doubt it.
I don't know if they're making $1 million a year, but they're, it's prestige television. They're making at minimum a good 6 figures, maybe into 7 figures. And they're sitting around talking about how taxes are too darn low. You guys can write an extra check to the Treasury anytime you want, right? Like, no one's stopping you. No one's, So, this is an astonishingly bad look. And I waver between feeling a smidgen of sympathy for Chuck Schumer. Because because he's getting he has stepped into a bear trap. He's in a situation where, as Senate Minority Leader, he does not have any leverage. Or very limited leverage. He could do the filibuster. But as we discussed earlier this week, if he had done the filibuster on the government shutdown, all the pressures on federal workers who aren't, go home and don't get paid until the shutdown is done. The pressure would be on him to reach the deal. His party would be the one who blocked the funding bill to reopen the government. All the press coverage of Millwood Middle School was not able to go to the Smithsonian. All of that would just be putting more pressure on the Democrats. And do you think Donald Trump would be eager to reopen the government? He'd be laughing. No. So Schumer's okay. I'm going to rip off the Band-Aid. I'm going to surrender now rather than surrender later. He's not going to be able to use the filibuster for the spending bill because that's being brought up under reconciliation. He's got really limited leverage here. And Democrats are very mad about these circumstances. They've decided to punish Chuck Schumer, and it's not really Chuck Schumer's fault. Now, that having been said, if you're a Democrat and you're up against the Trump administration, you don't have the Senate, you don't have the House, maybe Chuck Schumer is not the guy you want to have. He's not a whirling dervish of raw political charisma. And the whole ending thing, we're going to stand up and fight for that was not, You did not see everybody else in the View leaping out of their chair to applaud and feeling inspired. Joy Behar doesn't jump out of her chair for anything anymore, but nonetheless, you get the idea that even Guinan had no words of counsel for Schumer in those situations. So, by the way, you're in trouble when there's the Democrat leader feels the need to go on the View and assure them that he's up to the task. It's entirely possible Schumer's a lousy choice for this leader. I don't know anybody in the Senate Democrats who strikes me as a obvious natural improvement. Maybe you get somebody younger, maybe you get somebody a little more charismatic, but he's still playing the same hand. He still has the same, institutional limits there. So what exactly are you expecting Chuck Schumer to do to pull some rabbit out of a hat here? So we'll see. I'm enjoying this. I do think this is a certain amount of scapegoating, but it's also a recognition that congressional leaders, whether they ever intend to or not, when the opposition party has the White House, you become the face of the opposition. You become the leader of the opposition. And I think that's a role that Chuck Schumer is just really not prepared for and just really not the right guy for.
It's just fascinating to watch the hills that the Democrats are willing to at least fight on, if not die on here. So the progressive left and the bulk of his own caucus says you should have shut down the government. They're absolutely fit to be tied about the fact that criminal, illegal gang members from Venezuela were kicked out of the country. They are also very upset, and they filibustered a bill that would have kicked boys out of girls' sports, and just on it goes. They are picking the issues that over and over again the American people are overwhelmingly against them, but they just keep doubling down because they think they have to satiate the progressives here, and maybe they do. Maybe they actually do fear risking their base. But if their goal was to win back people in the middle, they're going in the opposite direction, a high rate of speed, which from our perspective is not terrible from a strategic standpoint, but for the good of the country, a little more sanity in that party wouldn't be the worst thing.
Greg, since the AOCs and the folks are so mad about this, and I guess they would say that they want, these Venezuelans who are getting deported, they want them to have freedom. Obviously, they want the freedom to continue abortion on demand, coast to coast, any circumstances. They want the freedom to let people come into this country without being impeded or by Customs and Border Patrol and stuff like that. So I think they should call themselves the House Freedom Caucus, and that their role would be to complain about leadership and insist that if they were in charge, they would get a better deal. And it's just everything would be. We just have to switch names a little bit. It'd be a piece of cake. So. Right now, Mitch McConnell's calling up Schumer and saying, "First time,
Chuck, you're finding out now." All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And as we said, kind of an odd figure back on the stage. We thought we were at least rid of him on the national stage for a while, but no, he's back. Tim Walz, the 2024 vice presidential nominee. Because he's so weird, will probably be better remembered than Tim Kaine, but maybe not by a lot. But he's back, and he's now going on tour, basically what he calls the least satisfying I told you so tour of all time. If you look at the polls, most of the people who voted for Trump aren't that sad at the election result as they look at the first couple months here. But Tim Walz says that he does find some odd satisfaction at times by checking something on his phone.
Saying on my phone, I don't know, some of you know this on the iPhone, they've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day. 225 and dropping. So, and if you own one, we're not blaming you. You can take dental floss and pull the Tesla thing off, and take out, just telling you.
Well, not surprising coming from the guy who condoned the Minneapolis riots. But, Jim, I'm not sure what he's accomplishing here. He seems to be running for a third term. Is he actually trying to position himself for 2028? Because I think there's going to be a pretty long line of Democrats ahead of him. But what do you say?
I really hate it when Greg's introduction to the topic kind of sets up the punchlines that I was going for already. I was saying I was perfectly ready for Tim Walz to appear on Saturday Night Live in 8 years in a sketch about how no one remembers him. And that's what I thought for a while. He was pretty quiet after the election. This is classified our crazy martini. I can make the case this is a good martini and not just the usual, every time Democrats are infighting, that's good news for our side. I think this is really good news for comedian Jim Gaffigan, who did a great impression of him on Saturday Night Live. And it was one of the saddest things about Harris and Walz losing the election was that, that impression was going to go into retirement. So maybe he'll get a chance to reuse this. I do find it fascinating that after insisting the only thing he might be running for is a third term as Minnesota governor. Nobody's done this since like the 1940s, and back then they had 2-year terms. So come on, Minnesota. Michelle Tafoya's right there. He certainly sounds like a guy who really wants to play a big voice in reshaping the party. And he says he's on the worst I told you so tour ever. Greg, what did he tell us that the Democratic Party did not heed? And if they weren't heed, I guess the other thing is, I just wish Tim Walz had been in some position where he could have influenced the 2024 Democratic presidential ticket. If only he'd had been on a debate stage or had a convention speech or maybe even campaigning alongside Kamala Harris, and he could have done something differently, like not be Tim Walz. I'm very curious about what lessons, and I guess his idea is that, this was the most, he likes to use his football metaphors, and so he says they were in the prevent defense at a time when they were trailing. And actually, as much as I like making fun of Tim Walz, I do think, in part because of polling, in part because of rosy media coverage, in part because of the fact that Trump had lost in 2020, there was this widespread perception that Harris was either neck and neck or leading or in okay shape in the blue states, and therefore she was going to be fine. And you look at the way Trump went 7-0 in the swing states, as interesting argument. You look at some of those margins. Maybe she was never ahead in any of those states, or maybe it was never as good as the Democrats wanted to believe it was. But if you're arguing that they were too safe in their decision making, was it Tim Walz part of that? Was it that, we don't want to risk Shapiro because, we can't, we can't antagonize the Jew haters in our party. It's not like we need the state of Pennsylvania. Now, winning Pennsylvania would not have reversed the election results, but nonetheless, it's certainly, I and everybody else had said, this guy is, no pun intended, manna from heaven, just sent to be the running mate that Harris needs. She did not pick him. And not only did, Walz not help in any of those blue wall states, the margin for Harris and Walz was worse than it was for Biden and Harris 4 years ago in his home state. If you want to know the real Tim Walz, turn to the voters who know him best. So I'm very curious about what Tim Walz thinks he's doing here and what lessons. And I'm sure he's it makes that crowd chuckle when you say, the Tesla stock price is down. Okay, how's your stock, Tim? I am sure that, first of all, Elon takes a giant pile of money and wipes the tears, probably tears of laughter, when he sees Tim. And he did respond, I feel the same way every time I look and I see the portrait of Vice President J.D. Vance. But if I were the Democrats and I were really worried about 2028, and it's real early, but I would be unnerved by the fact that Tim Walz still thinks he has something useful to contribute to this conversation, and that it certainly seems like he thinks the answer is more of him, when in fact he had kind of been, kryptonite for the Democratic ticket that probably was in weaker shape than everybody thought. But he certainly did not help any, and he certainly did not bring men to the ticket, and no governor, no one is intimidated by your raw, masculine, no pun intended, Musk.
Not at all. 225 and dropping. He's got that fake tough guy persona that Biden tried to have, and nobody's buying it, obviously. It's kind of like the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where you're still here? Why? Go home.
What are you doing
here? Over. It's over. But you know who might actually be the biggest winner out of this? Is Josh Shapiro, because there's no guarantee that had he been on a ticket that they would have actually won. If he had lost, then he'd be saddled with the Kamala Harris failure for the rest of his political career, and they'd be less interested in him potentially for a national campaign down the road. So if he is interested in 2028 or some other time, it's probably better for him that he wasn't on that ticket, honestly. Jim, all sorts of ideas heading into 2026, 2028. But speaking of ideas, you're going to have a lot of them over the next couple of days because you're going to be at the National Review Ideas Summit. So you will not be here, but we will miss you. We will carry on, and we will see you on Monday.
Yes. As much as I hate to turn away from the Three Martini Lunch podcast, I'll be interviewing Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. I'll be interviewing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and First Lady of Florida as well. And I'm also on a panel, so I'm just going to call everyone governor for the next 3 days, just to be on the safe side, just to make sure I don't accidentally mislabel anyone. Good news for Phil Klein and my fellow panelists.
Yes, excellent. And just to clarify something from our Ukraine special, will you be letting people try on the body armor for $1 a piece, or did that not happen?
So there won't be a charge. But stuff weighs a ton, so I'm kicking it around the idea. I probably won't do it. because I got to be there all day, and I don't want to, you don't want to leave that kind of stuff around. So, talk to me. We'll arrange a meeting. We'll arrange a circuit. Actually, if you really want to do it, find me on Thursday, and I'll bring it Friday, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, if there's a lot of interest, maybe I'll do it Friday. We'll see.
Oh, fantastic.
But also, no one gets to test the armor. As far as I know, it's perfectly good. It's perfectly fine. This isn't Mythbusters.
It's not Iron Man.
Yes.
Well, anyway, have a good time. Hopefully there are a lot of good conservative ideas percolating out there. We look forward to hearing about those. And we'll see you on Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends to do it as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. They are a big help to us. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a fantastic Wednesday and join us again Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.